Chosen one, why have you been fighting battles that others never had to face? Why does your bank account empty just when breakthrough seems within reach? Why do you lie awake at 3 a.m. wondering if God has forgotten your address while watching others coast through life on what feels like divine autopilot? If this message found you tonight, it is not by accident. Chosen one, you passed. Heaven saw every tear that soaked your pillow in silence, every bill you couldn't pay while still tithing in faith, every prayer you whispered when your voice was too broken to speak aloud. And tonight, right now, God is saying something that will shatter every lie you've believed about your future. I will fund your entire life from this moment forward. You've been carrying a weight that was never meant for your shoulders, fighting a financial battle with weapons you were never supposed to wield, begging for bread when you were born, to own the bakery. But that ends tonight. Because what I'm about to reveal will explain why every closed door was actually divine redirection, and why every test you endured was heaven's final exam. You passed. Stay with me, because in the next few minutes, I'm going to show you the 3 signs that prove God's funding is already flowing into your life. Signs you've been seeing but didn't recognize. And I'm going to give you the one declaration that activates heaven's treasury over your bank account, your health, your family, your dreams. But first, and this might shock you, I need to tell you why the enemy has been fighting you so hard. It's not because you're weak. It's because he saw what's coming in your life, and it terrified him. Before we go deeper into this sacred moment together, I want to pause and thank every single one of you who has supported this message through super thanks. Your generosity means more than you know. You're not just donating. You're helping spread light to others who feel alone in their calling. Whether you give or not, I'm deeply grateful for your presence here, your support, your time, your attention. It all matters. And if this message resonates with your soul, go ahead and plant that seed of faith. If this is already hitting something deep in your spirit, if you feel that familiar stirring that says, "This is for me," type AMEN in the comments, or whisper it under your breath right now. That small act is your first prophetic yes. Your agreement with heaven's plan to fund the life you were always meant to live. Because chosen one, your season of struggle just expired. Why did your marriage collapse when you were faithful? Why did that job vanish the same week your mortgage payment was due? Why did your children turn their backs on you after you sacrificed everything to raise them right? You've been asking these questions for years, haven't you? Lying in that empty bed at 2 a.m., staring at the ceiling, wondering if you somehow failed God's test. Wondering if your pain was punishment for sins you couldn't even remember committing. But what if I told you that every single tear you've cried was being collected in heaven's bottles? What if those moments when you felt most abandoned were actually when God was closest to you, grading your paper with eyes of love? You walked through fire, didn't you? Divorce papers scattered across the kitchen table while your coffee grew cold. Bills stacked so high you couldn't see over them, each envelope a fresh reminder that the world had written you off. Those nights when the phone never rang because everyone else had moved on with their lives, leaving you to face the darkness alone. You thought you were failing, but heaven was grading differently. See, the world grades on a curve of comfort. Heaven grades on a curve of character. The world measures success by what you accumulate. God measures victory by what you survive. And dear chosen one, you have survived tests that would have shattered lesser souls into dust. Remember Joseph, 17 years old with dreams of greatness, only to be thrown into a pit by his own brothers, sold like cattle to strangers, falsely accused by Potiphar's wife, and forgotten in a dungeon for years. The world would have called him a failure, a victim, a man whom God had clearly abandoned. But Genesis 50:20 reveals the divine curriculum. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. Every pit was preparation, every prison was promotion waiting to unfold. Every moment Joseph felt forgotten, God was positioning him for a palace he couldn't even imagine. That's your story too. When your spouse walked out, calling you boring, saying you'd never amount to anything that wasn't your final grade. That was God removing someone who couldn't handle your destiny. When your business failed, and you lost everything you'd worked decades to build, that wasn't punishment. That was redirection toward a purpose bigger than profit. When your own children looked at you with shame, embarrassed by your struggles, your faith, your refusal to give up on a God who seemed to have given up on you, that wasn't evidence of your failure as a parent. That was the enemy's desperate attempt to silence the voice he knew would one day call them home. Psalm 34:18 doesn't just say God is near to the broken-hearted. It says he saves those who are crushed in spirit. The Hebrew word for saves here is yasha. It means to deliver with great power, to rescue with divine intervention. Your crushing wasn't cruelty, it was cultivation. Think about grapes. They don't become wine through gentle encouragement. They become wine through crushing. The harder the press, the richer the vintage. And you, precious soul, you have been pressed by pressures that would have destroyed ordinary people. But you're still here, still breathing, still believing, still choosing faith when everything around you screams for surrender. That's not luck. That's not stubbornness. That's divine DNA flowing through your spiritual bloodstream, keeping you alive when death would have been easier. You survived the midnight panic attacks when the bills outnumbered your prayers. You survived watching your friends prosper while you scraped pennies together, wondering why God's favor seemed to skip your address. You survived the doctor's reports that tried to steal your hope. The family gatherings where you felt like a stranger in your own bloodline. Every test was designed to reveal what you're made of. And what you're made of, chosen one, is pure spiritual steel. The world looks at your scars and sees damage, but heaven looks at your scars and sees diploma proof that you passed God's most advanced courses. Betrayal 101, loss and recovery 201, faith in the dark 301. You didn't just audit these classes. You earned your degree with honors. Your limp is your testimony. Your wounds are your weapons. Your survival is your certification that you can handle what's coming next. Because here's what the enemy never wanted you to discover. He wasn't trying to destroy you randomly. He was trying to prevent you specifically. Every attack was confirmation that you carry something he desperately fears. Something that threatens his kingdom. Something that shines so bright it makes darkness flee just by walking into a room. You thought you were barely hanging on, but you were actually hanging on to purpose, to calling, to a destiny so powerful that hell had to mobilize its finest demons just to try to derail you. They failed. You passed. Not because you were perfect, but because you were persistent. Not because you were strong, but because you refused to stay down. Not because you understood the curriculum, but because you trusted the teacher. Your scars are not proof of defeat. They are the diploma that says you passed God's exam. If you know you've passed through fire and are still standing, if you recognize your story in these words, if something deep in your spirit is stirring with recognition, declare it right now. I passed. Say it out loud. Let the walls of your home hear it. Let the neighbors wonder what changed in your voice. Let heaven mark this moment when you finally understood that every test was preparation for the blessing that's about to flood your life. Because now that you've passed, now that heaven has your final transcript, God is ready to fund the life you earned through fire. You've been lied to about what God's funding actually looks like. The world told you it's just money dropping from heaven into your bank account, but that's not funding, that's fantasy. Let me tell you what real divine funding looks like, and it's going to blow your mind. God's funding isn't just about your wallet, it's about your worry. It's that peace that settles over your mind at 2 a.m. when the bills are stacked on your kitchen table, and instead of panic, you feel this supernatural calm whispering, "I've got this." That's not optimism, dear one. That's divine funding flowing directly into your spirit account. Remember Sarah Jenkins from Queens, 83 years old, living on $847 a month in Social Security. The doctors said her heart was failing, gave her 6 months to live. Her children were planning her funeral. But God wasn't writing checks from some celestial bank. He was wiring strength straight into her tired bones. Today, 2 years later, she's still here, still praising, still walking 3 miles every morning. Her cardiologist calls it a medical mystery. I call it divine funding. You see, God doesn't operate like Wall Street. He doesn't deal in stock options and credit scores. Malachi 3:10 promises something far more powerful. Test me in this, says the Lord Almighty, and see if I will not throw open the floodgates of heaven and pour out so much blessing that there will not be room enough to store it. But what are those floodgates really releasing? It's not just cash, it's capacity. The ability to stand when you should have fallen. The strength to forgive when bitterness would have been easier. The health that defies every medical report. The peace that makes no sense to anyone watching your circumstances. Let me ask you something that's going to cut deep. How many mornings have you woken up and wondered how you're going to make it through another day? How many times have you felt your body giving out, your mind shutting down, your spirit ready to surrender? Yet here you are, still breathing, still believing, still standing. That's not willpower keeping you upright. That's divine funding. When Jesus declared in John 16:33, "In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world," he wasn't offering you a motivational speech. He was signing a funding agreement. Every trouble you face has already been overcome. Every battle you're fighting has already been won. Your victory isn't pending, it's purchased. Think about Martha Rodriguez from the Bronx. Lost her husband of 47 years. Her pension disappeared in a company bankruptcy. Her daughter battling cancer. By every earthly measure, she should have been destroyed. But God's funding meant something different. Instead of despair, she found purpose. Started a grief support group in her church basement. Today, she's helping hundreds of widows discover that their story isn't over, it's just beginning a new chapter. This is what funding really means. Chosen one. It means you don't have to hustle for what's already been purchased by the cross. You don't have to earn what's already been paid for. You don't have to strive for what's already been deposited into your spiritual inheritance account. The enemy wants you to believe that funding is about accumulation. But God's funding is about activation. Activating the peace that surpasses understanding. Activating the strength that rises when you're at your weakest. Activating the hope that burns bright when everything around you looks dark. You've been checking your bank balance when you should have been checking your blessing balance. You've been worried about your credit score when you should have been celebrating your spiritual score. God doesn't need your financial statements to approve your funding. He looks at your faith statements. Every tear you've cried in secret, that was a deposit. Every prayer you whispered when your voice was breaking, that was an investment. Every time you chose to trust God when circumstances screamed otherwise, that was compound interest building in heaven's economy. Here's what's about to happen in your life, and you need to prepare yourself for this shift. Your phone is going to ring with opportunities you never applied for. Your mailbox is going to contain letters that change everything. Your doctor is going to use words like remarkable and unexplained. Your family is going to ask, "What's different about you?" That's divine funding flowing into every area of your existence. But you have to understand something crucial. This funding isn't automatic. It requires your agreement. It demands your declaration. It needs your voice to activate what heaven has already authorized. Right now, I need you to say this aloud, and I don't care who's listening. Say it with conviction. Say it with authority. Say it like you mean it. My bills are covered. My body is covered. My future is covered because I'm funded by God. Did you feel that shift? That's not just words, that's a spiritual transaction taking place. You just told the universe that you're no longer operating in Earth's economy. You're now funded by heaven's unlimited resources. But here's the question that will determine whether you walk in this funding or walk away from it. Are you ready to stop living like a beggar when God has declared you an heir? Listen to me carefully, chosen one. For 70, 80, maybe 90 years, You've been hearing the same poisonous whispers, the same demonic lies that have echoed through your mind like a broken record player stuck on the worst song ever written. You're too old now. Your time has passed. You missed your moment. You'll never recover from that bankruptcy. You'll never bounce back from that divorce. You'll never overcome that diagnosis. Your children will struggle just like you did. Poverty is your family's curse. Every single morning when you looked in the mirror, that voice got louder. Every time you opened your mailbox to another bill you couldn't pay, that whisper became a roar. Every night when you laid your head on that pillow, wondering if tomorrow would bring any relief, the enemy celebrated what he thought was his victory over your spirit. But I'm here tonight to expose the greatest con game ever played on God's chosen ones. Every lie the devil told you was actually a setup for God's truth to shine brighter. Every attack was positioning you for a comeback so spectacular that hell itself would have to acknowledge the power of the Almighty working through a surrendered soul. You see, dear one, the enemy made one fatal mistake. He showed his hand too early. He revealed exactly what he was afraid of by attacking you so viciously. Why do you think the warfare has been so intense in your life? Why do you think every step forward felt like you were walking through quicksand? Because the devil saw your destiny before you did. He saw what God was preparing to fund in your life, and it terrified him. Isaiah 54:17 declares with thunderous authority, "No weapon formed against you shall prosper, and every tongue which rises against you in judgment you shall condemn." Did you catch that? No weapon. Not some weapons. Not most weapons. Every weapon that hell manufactured specifically for your destruction has already failed. The foreclosure notice, that should have broken you. It redirected you to something better. The job you lost at 62. It was God making room for his provision. The health scare that shook you to your core. Heaven was proving that your life is in his hands, not a doctor's report. Think about this for a moment. The enemy threw dart after dart at your dreams, your finances, your family, your faith. But here's what he didn't know. God wasn't just deflecting those darts. He was collecting them, melting them down, and using every single attack as raw material to chisel your destiny into something the devil never saw coming. Every rejection carved humility into your character. Every financial struggle taught you to trust God when the bank account said zero. Every sleepless night of worry was building your capacity to rest in his promises when everything around you screams chaos. The enemy thought he was destroying you, but God was actually sculpting you. You've been living in a war zone, haven't you? Dodging financial bullets, ducking relationship grenades, crawling through the trenches of health battles that seem to have no end. But what you didn't realize is that every attack that didn't kill you was actually making you bulletproof. Every storm you weathered was installing spiritual armor that cannot be penetrated by human circumstances. The devil looked at your bank account and bet you'd give up. He looked at your age and wagered you'd settle for less. He examined your past mistakes and gambled that shame would keep you small forever. But here's the explosive truth that's about to detonate every lie you've believed about your future. The devil bet against you, but God invested in you. And the creator of the universe never backs a losing bet. While Satan was calculating your failures, the Almighty was compounding interest on your faithfulness. While hell was tallying your defeats, heaven was recording your victories. Every time you got back up when staying down would have been easier, God saw it. Every time you tithed when you couldn't afford groceries, he noticed. Every time you praised him in the valley, when you felt like cursing the mountain, your account in heaven's bank grew larger. You think you've been struggling all these years? No, chosen one. You've been in training. God has been funding your education in the University of Adversity, and you just graduated with honors. Every test you passed qualified you for the blessing you're about to receive. Every trial you endured built the spiritual muscle you'll need to carry the weight of his abundance. The enemy whispered, "You'll never have enough." But God thunders, "I own the cattle on 1,000 hills, and I'm about to open my storehouses over your life. The devil hissed, "You're too broken to be blessed." But heaven declares, "I specialize in taking what's broken and making it beautiful, taking what's empty and making it overflow." Right now, as these words penetrate your spirit, can you feel the shift? Can you sense the atmosphere changing around your life? That's not your imagination. That's the sound of every weapon formed against you falling to the ground in complete defeat. That's the rumble of heaven's artillery positioning itself for your victory. The war for your destiny is over. Hell lost, heaven won, and you're about to live like it. Type "funded" in the comments right now if you're ready to live like hell lost and heaven won, because what I'm about to reveal next will show you exactly how God's funding system works and why it's already flowing into every area of your life. You want to know how God funds a life? Let me take you back 3,000 years to a 17-year-old boy named Joseph, rotting in an Egyptian dungeon, falsely accused. Forgotten by everyone who promised to remember him, his dreams seemed dead, buried under the weight of injustice and abandonment. But here's what Joseph didn't know, and what you need to understand tonight. God had already signed the check for his palace before he ever saw the prison. Listen to me carefully, chosen one. Every tear Joseph cried in that cell was God preparing the compassion he'd need to rule an empire. Every night he spent wondering if he'd been forgotten was heaven developing the character required to save nations from famine. Genesis 41-40 records Pharaoh's words, "You shall be in charge of my palace, and all my people are to submit to your orders." From prisoner to prime minister in a single day. That's not luck, that's divine funding. You've been in your own prison, haven't you? Maybe it's death that follows you like a shadow. Maybe it's that diagnosis the doctors can't explain away. Maybe it's the loneliness that sits in your chest like a stone, making you wonder if God has forgotten your address entirely. But what if I told you that your prison is actually your preparation? What if every closed door, every rejection letter, every bank statement that made your stomach drop was God positioning you for a funding that would make Joseph's story look small? Now let me tell you about a 5-year-old man named Abraham. God told him to pack up everything he owned and follow a promise to a place he'd never seen. No GPS, no Google Maps, no guarantee, except the word of the Almighty. Can you imagine? At 75, when most folks are thinking about retirement communities, Abraham was being called to pioneer nations. Here's what gets me. Abraham never worried about provision, not once. Genesis 22:14 says Abraham called that place, "The Lord will provide Jehovah Jireh." Every step he took, every tent he pitched, every altar he built, provision followed him like morning follows night. Why? Because when God calls you somewhere, he funds the journey, every mile, every meal, every miracle you'll need along the way. You've been afraid to step out, haven't you? Afraid to start that business because the bank account says no. Afraid to believe for healing because the medical reports look grim. Afraid to trust God's voice because the world's voice is so much louder. But Abraham teaches us something that will revolutionize your life. When God gives you a promise, he prepays the path. Then there's Noah. Picture this, a 600-year-old man building a cruise ship in his backyard when it hadn't rained in decades. His neighbors thought he'd lost his mind. The weather forecast showed clear skies indefinitely. But Noah kept building because he understood something the mockers didn't. When God tells you to build, he's already arranged the storm that will prove you were right. Genesis 7:1 records God's words. "Go into the ark, you and your whole family, because I have found you righteous in this generation." That ark wasn't just wood and tar. It was God's funding plan for humanity's survival. Every board Noah hammered was backed by heaven's treasury. Every animal that walked up that ramp was guided by divine appointment. When the floods came, and they always come, Noah's obedience became the world's salvation. You've been building something, haven't you? Maybe it's faith when everything around you is falling apart. Maybe it's hope when the statistics say give up. Maybe it's love when your heart has been shattered so many times you've lost count. Keep building, chosen one. The flood that everyone fears is coming to float your ark. But here's where this gets personal, where it stops being ancient history and starts being your destiny. Joseph didn't know he was being prepared for Pharaoh's palace. Abraham didn't know his journey would birth nations. Noah didn't know his ark would save the world. And you don't know what doors are waiting for your key. Your name is already written on opportunities you can't see yet. Painted in gold letters on boardroom doors, where decisions about your future are being made by people you've never met. Etched in marble above doorways to healing rooms, where your miracle is already scheduled. Carved in the gates of blessing that will swing open the moment your preparation meets God's timing. Revelation 3-8 declares, "I have placed before you an open door that no one can shut." Not will place, have placed, present tense, already done. The door exists right now, waiting for you to walk through it. But you have to stop living like the funding isn't coming. Stop making decisions from fear when you're backed by faith. Stop thinking small when you're connected to the God who spoke galaxies into existence with a whisper. If God funded Joseph's rise from prison to palace, if he bankrolled Abraham's journey from nobody to father of nations, if he financed Noah's ark when the whole world thought he was crazy, why wouldn't he fund your breakthrough? Your season of barely making it is over. Your days of wondering if God sees your struggle are finished. Your time of carrying burdens you were never meant to bear ends tonight. Raise your hand right now, even if you're alone in your living room, and declare this truth out loud. My name is on doors I can't see yet. God is funding my future, and I receive it by faith. Say it like you mean it, because heaven is listening, and your declaration just activated something that's been waiting for your voice to release it. But before those doors swing open, there's something else you need to understand about how God's funding really works. You know what's been killing me, chosen one? You've been given the keys to the kingdom, but you're still standing outside the gate asking permission to enter. You've been declared worthy by the Almighty Himself, yet you're still operating like a beggar instead of the heir you are. Listen to me carefully. There's a difference between knowing you're funded and walking in that funding. There's a chasm between believing God will provide and actually receiving what He's already released. And right now, I'm going to bridge that gap with 5 non-negotiable steps that will activate heaven's economy in your life. But first, let me ask you something that's going to cut deep. How long are you going to keep God waiting? How many more years are you going to waste wondering if His promises are true while others are living in the overflow you're supposed to be walking in? Step 1. Trust fully, the foundation of all funding. Proverbs 3-5-6 says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your paths straight." But here's what most people miss. That word all isn't a suggestion, it's a requirement. You've been giving God 80% trust while keeping 20% as a backup plan. You've been believing for provision while simultaneously plotting your own rescue. But God's funding only flows through complete surrender, not partial commitment. Look at Abraham. When God told him to sacrifice Isaac, the very son through whom the promise was supposed to come, Abraham didn't argue with the math. He didn't say, "God, this doesn't make financial sense." He trusted fully, even when it looked like God was destroying his own plan. And what happened? God provided a ram, and the promise multiplied beyond imagination. Your backup plans aren't protecting you, they're blocking you. Every contingency you've prepared is telling heaven you don't really believe the check is coming. But when you trust fully, you create space for God to move in ways that defy human logic. Step 2. Release anxiety, the poison that stops the flow. 1 Peter 5-7 commands us to cast all your anxiety on Him because He cares for you. Not some anxiety, all anxiety. But you've been carrying that financial fear like a security blanket, haven't you? Clutching it so tight that your hands aren't free to receive what God's trying to give you. Here's what anxiety really is. It's you telling God that His provision isn't enough, that his timing is wrong, that his plan needs your help. But anxiety is the enemy of abundance. Worry is the opposite of worship. Fear blocks the very faith that activates funding. Think about the widow in 1 Kings 17. She was down to her last meal, literally her final handful of flour and drop of oil. But when Elijah asked her to feed him first, she released her anxiety about tomorrow and trusted God with her today. Result? Her oil never ran dry, her flour never ran out. Not during the entire famine. Your anxiety isn't protecting your future, it's poisoning your present. When you release it completely, you're telling heaven, I trust your provision more than my own planning. Step 3. Walk boldly. Faith moves mountains and bank accounts. Hebrews 11:1 defines faith as confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. But confidence isn't passive, it's active, it moves, it takes steps. It makes decisions based on God's word, not your bank statement. You want to know why you're still broke? Because you've been tiptoeing around your destiny instead of marching into it. You've been asking God for signs when He's already given you His word. You've been waiting for feelings when He's calling for faith. Remember David facing Goliath? He didn't wait until he felt ready. He didn't practice for years before stepping onto the battlefield. He saw the giant, remembered God's faithfulness, and ran toward the fight. 1 stone, 1 shot, giant down, nation saved. Your giants aren't your financial problems, they're your faith problems. And faith that doesn't move isn't faith at all. It's just wishful thinking, wearing Sunday clothes. Step 4. Live with gratitude. The attitude that activates abundance. Philippians 4:6-7 says, Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God will guard your hearts and minds. Notice that word, thanksgiving. Not after you receive, with your requests. You thank God for provision while you're still broke. You praise Him for the breakthrough while you're still in the valley. You worship Him for the answered prayer while you're still waiting. This isn't positive thinking, this is prophetic living. You're calling things that are not as though they were, because in God's economy, gratitude is the currency that releases supply. Look at Jesus feeding the 5,000. What did He do before the multiplication? He gave thanks. For 5 loaves and 2 fish that couldn't possibly feed that crowd. But His gratitude activated the miracle, and everyone ate until they were satisfied with 12 baskets left over. Your gratitude today determines your abundance tomorrow. When you thank God in advance, you're agreeing with heaven's timing instead of arguing with your circumstances. Step 5. Walk it out. The movement that manifests miracles. Here's the climax truth that will change everything. Your job is not to figure it out. Your job is to walk it out. The check is already signed. God isn't waiting for you to understand His methods. He's waiting for you to trust His madness. He's not asking you to see the whole staircase. Just take the next step. Every move you make in faith is another signature on heaven's check, releasing resources you can't yet see. You've been stuck in analysis paralysis, trying to figure out how God's going to do what He promised. But His ways are higher than your ways. His thoughts aren't your thoughts. Your job isn't to be God's financial advisor, it's to be His obedient child. Stop asking how. Start walking where. Stop questioning when. Start moving now. Write this in your notebook, in big letters. The check is signed. That's not a hope. That's your contract with heaven. That's your agreement with the Almighty that His provision is already flowing, and you're stepping into the stream. But here's the question that will determine whether you live in funding or die in fear. Will you take the first step, or will you spend another year standing at the edge of your miracle, too afraid to move? Because, chosen one, God's funding isn't waiting for your permission anymore. It's waiting for your participation. Listen to me carefully. Chosen one, while you've been counting your losses, heaven has been counting your victories. While you've been tracking your failures, God has been tracking your faithfulness. And what I'm about to reveal will shatter every lie you've believed about how the divine economy really works. What if I told you heaven has been keeping receipts on your behalf? For 70, 80, maybe 90 years, you've watched others prosper while you scraped by. You've seen younger folks buy houses you could never afford, take vacations you could only dream about, retire with security you've never known. And somewhere deep in your heart, you've whispered the question that haunts every faithful soul. God, what about me? Don't you see how hard I've tried? He sees, and he's been recording every single moment. Think about that night in 1987 when you gave your last $20 to the church offering, knowing you had no groceries for the week. You thought nobody noticed. God recorded it. That time in 1994 when you prayed for your neighbor's sick child instead of asking for your own healing, you thought it went unnoticed. Heaven documented it. Every tear you've cried over a prodigal child, every prayer you've whispered for a broken marriage, every act of quiet faith. When the world was watching someone else, it's all been entered into the ledger of eternity. Psalm 56:8 tells us something that will blow your mind. You keep track of all my sorrows. You have collected all my tears in your bottle. You have recorded each one in your book. God doesn't just see your tears. He bottles them, he labels them, he treasures them like liquid gold in heaven's vault. But here's what will shock you even more. Those tears weren't just collected, they were converted. Every drop of sorrow you've shed has been transformed into equity in heaven's bank. Every prayer you've prayed in desperation has become a deposit in your divine account. The banks of Wall Street may fail, but heaven's treasury never defaults. You've been living like a spiritual pauper when you're actually heaven's millionaire. Revelation 5:8 paints the most stunning picture. The 4 living creatures and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb. Each one had a harp, and they were holding golden bowls full of incense, which are the prayers of God's holy people. Your prayers, every desperate cry at 3 a.m., every whispered plea for strength, they haven't disappeared into the void. They've been collected in golden bowls before the throne of the Almighty. Golden bowls, chosen one, not plastic containers, not cheap storage. Golden bowls, because that's how valuable your faithfulness is to heaven. Now let me tell you something that's going to rock your world. You know those unpaid bills of your soul, the debt of disappointment, the mortgage of heartbreak, the credit card balance of broken dreams. Every single one has been stamped with blood-red letters, paid in full. When Jesus hung on that cross, he wasn't just paying for your sins, he was settling your accounts. Every moment you felt cheated by life, every time you gave more than you received, every sacrifice that went unnoticed, Jesus looked at the ledger and said, "I'll cover that debt." But here's where most believers miss it. They think heaven's economy works like earth's economy. They think you give, you receive, end of story. But God's mathematics are different. In heaven's ledger, your faithfulness doesn't just earn interest, it earns inheritance. You've been making deposits for decades without knowing it. Every time you chose forgiveness over bitterness, you made a deposit. Every time you blessed someone who cursed you, you made a deposit. Every time you tithed when you couldn't afford groceries, you made a massive deposit. And now, God is saying, it's time to collect. Do you remember the widow in 1 Kings 17? She was down to her last meal, literally her last handful of flour and drop of oil. Death was knocking at her door, but when Elijah asked her to feed him first, she did it. And what happened? Her flour never ran out, her oil never dried up, not during the entire famine. That's heaven's ledger in action. One act of radical faith unlocked unlimited provision. And you, dear chosen one, you've made thousands of such deposits. Every sacrifice you made for your children when they didn't appreciate it recorded. Every prayer you prayed for ungrateful relatives banked. Every kindness you showed to strangers who never said thank you invested with compound interest in heaven's economy. But here's the part that's going to bring you to your knees. God hasn't just been recording your deposits. He's been calculating your dividends. and the payout that's coming will leave you speechless. Think about this. A single tear you shed over your wayward son in 1982 has been earning spiritual interest for over 40 years. That prayer you prayed for your neighbor's healing in 1995, it's been multiplying in heaven's investment portfolio. The widow's mite you gave when you were struggling in 2008, it's been compounding daily at heaven's rate of return. You thought you were poor, but you've been rich and didn't know it. Every unpaid bill of your soul, God stamped it paid. Every emotional debt you've carried, Jesus signed the check. Every heartbreak that left you bankrupt, heaven covered the balance. Chosen one, the hidden ledger of heaven is about to be revealed. And when you see what's been accumulating in your name, when you discover the spiritual fortune you've been building through decades of faithfulness, you're going to understand why the enemy fought you so hard. He wasn't trying to destroy you, he was trying to keep you from discovering your heaven's millionaire. Heaven has not only seen you, it has already prepared your payout. But here's the key that unlocks everything. You have to believe it. You have to stop seeing yourself as the victim and start seeing yourself as the victor. You have to stop counting your losses and start claiming your ledger. Whisper this to your heart right now. Heaven remembers me. If those words stir something deep in your spirit, write them in the comments, because that simple declaration isn't just faith, it's the password that accesses your divine account. The ledger is open, chosen one. Your name is at the top, and the balance, it's more than enough to fund the rest of your life. But knowing about your account and accessing it are two different things, and what I'm about to show you next will give you the keys to withdraw everything heaven has been storing up in your name. Listen to me, chosen one. Every single thing that was stolen from you is coming back. But not just coming back, it's coming back multiplied, magnified, and overflowing with divine interest that will leave your enemies speechless. You've been robbed, haven't you? Not just of money, but of dreams. Not just of opportunities, but of hope itself. That business deal that fell through at the last minute. The promotion they gave to someone half your age. The inheritance that was supposed to secure your retirement, but vanished in lawyers' fees and family greed. The health you took for granted, until the diagnosis changed everything. But what if I told you that every no in your life was not rejection, it was redirection? What if every door that slammed in your face wasn't God abandoning you, but God protecting you from settling for less than His best? You see, the enemy has been running a cosmic con game on your life. He convinced you that those losses were final, that those closed doors were permanent, that your best years were behind you. But Satan is not just a liar, he's a thief. And according to heaven's law, thieves must pay restitution. Exodus 22:4 declares it with thunderous authority. If the stolen animal is found alive in the thief's possession, whether ox or donkey or sheep, he must pay back double. Double. The enemy didn't just take your stuff, he signed his own bankruptcy papers. Think about Job for a moment. This wasn't just a man who lost everything, this was a man who had everything stolen by demonic forces. His wealth, his children, his health, his reputation. Even his wife told him to curse God and die. But Job understood something that will revolutionize your perspective on loss. When God restores, He doesn't just replace, He multiplies. Job 42:10 records the cosmic reversal. The Lord restored Job's fortunes and gave him twice as much as he had before. Twice, not just what was taken, double what was stolen. 7,000 sheep became 14,000. 3,000 camels became 6,000. The man who lost everything ended up with more than he ever dreamed possible. That's your story, chosen one. What the enemy pawned, God is buying back with interest. But here's where it gets personal. Here's where heaven's mathematics meets your bank account, your relationships, your health, your dreams. Every tear you've cried over what was stolen has been collecting compound interest in heaven's vault. Every sleepless night wondering how you'd make it has been earning dividends of destiny. Joel 2:25 thunders across your situation right now. I will restore to you the years that the swarming locust has eaten. Not just the months, the years. Plural. Multiple. overwhelming. The locusts of betrayal, the locusts of financial ruin, the locusts of broken promises, the locusts of delayed dreams. God is calculating every single day they devoured, and He's about to release a harvest that will stagger your understanding. You've been living like a victim of theft, but you're about to discover you're the beneficiary of heaven's greatest stock split. Your losses are being converted into dividends of destiny. Your setbacks are being transformed into supernatural comebacks. Your delays are being rewritten as divine deposits that have been earning interest for decades. Remember the widow of Zarephath, down to her last meal, preparing to die with her son. But when she gave Elijah that final jar of oil and handful of flour, something miraculous happened. 1 Kings 17:16 declares, "The jar of flour was not used up, and the jug of oil did not run dry." What should have run out kept flowing. What appeared to be the end became the beginning of supernatural supply. That's you right now. What looks like the end of your resources is actually the beginning of your restoration. What feels like your final chapter is actually the opening scene of your greatest comeback. But let me tell you something that will shake you to your core. The enemy didn't just steal from you randomly, he stole strategically. He took what he knew would cripple your calling. He attacked what he knew would fund your purpose. He destroyed what he knew would demonstrate God's power through your life. That's why the restoration isn't just personal, it's prophetic. When God restores what was stolen from you, He's not just blessing you, He's sending a message to every demon in hell that they messed with the wrong chosen one. Your financial comeback will silence every voice that said you'd never recover. Your health restoration will confound every doctor who gave you a death sentence. Your family reconciliation will prove to every skeptic that God still works miracles. Your dream fulfillment will demonstrate to your generation that it's never too late to live the life God designed. But here's the urgency that should grip your soul right now. This restoration isn't automatic. It requires your partnership. It demands your faith. It needs your voice to speak what hasn't manifested yet, as if it already exists. Right now, even if you're sitting alone in your living room, even if your bank account is empty, even if the doctor's report is grim, even if your family is scattered, lift your hands. Lift them like you're receiving what's already yours. Lift them like you believe God's mathematics over the world's subtraction. And declare with everything in you, everything stolen is coming back double. Every closed door is reopening with interest. Every setback is setting me up for a comeback that will astound my enemies and amaze my friends. Because, chosen one, you're not just recovering from what you lost, you're rebounding into overflow that will rewrite your family's financial DNA forever. But the question that will determine whether you receive this prophetic reversal or watch it pass you by is simple. Will you lift your hands in faith, or will you keep them folded in doubt? Dear chosen one, let me ask you something that's going to cut straight to your heart. When you're gone, when your earthly journey ends and you're standing before the throne of glory, what will your family inherit? Your grandmother's china, your grandfather's watch? Or will they inherit something far more precious, far more powerful, far more eternal? They will inherit the overflow of your obedience. You see, God's funding doesn't stop with you. It doesn't end when your bank account closes or when your final breath is drawn. No, beloved. What heaven has released over your life is a generational river that flows forward, cascading through bloodlines you'll never meet, touching lives you'll never see. Your grandchildren are already walking under umbrellas you built in tears. Think about this for a moment. Every midnight prayer you whispered while bouncing a colicky baby, every time you chose faith over fear when the bills piled high, every moment you tithed your last $20 because you believed God's promise over your bank statement, those weren't just acts of desperation. They were deposits into a divine trust fund that your great-grandchildren will withdraw from in 2075. But here's what breaks my heart. So many of you sitting there right now think your financial struggles, your late-in-life breakthrough, your decades of barely getting by somehow disqualifies your legacy. You think because you never became the millionaire your dreams promised, you have nothing to leave behind. You couldn't be more wrong. The ink of your obedience is writing checks your family will cash for generations. Listen to what Moses declared in Deuteronomy 7-9. Know therefore that the Lord your God is God. He is the faithful God, keeping his covenant of love to 1,000 generations of those who love him and keep his commandments. 1,000 generations. Do you understand what that means? Your faithfulness today is programming prosperity for family members who won't be born for another 500 years. Abraham didn't see Isaac until he was 100 years old. But God wasn't just funding Abraham's immediate need for a son. He was funding a nation that would bless every family on earth. Genesis 22:17 records God's promise. I will surely bless you and make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and as the sand on the seashore. Your late-night prayers aren't just for you. They're seeding the soil for descendants who will walk in abundance you can't even imagine. What if your faith today is underwriting the miracles of tomorrow? Let me paint you a picture that will shatter every lie you've believed about your worth. Right now, somewhere in the future, there's a young woman, your great-granddaughter, standing at the threshold of her dream business. The bank loan she needs seems impossible. Her credit isn't perfect. The economy is uncertain. But something supernatural happens. Doors open that shouldn't open. Favor flows from unexpected sources. Money appears from directions that defy logic. Why? Because 70 years earlier, her great-grandmother you chose to trust God's funding over her own fear. Your obedience created a spiritual trust account that she's now able to access. This isn't fantasy. This is how God's economy works. Psalm 112:2 declares with thunderous authority, their children will be mighty in the land. The generation of the upright will be blessed. The Hebrew word for mighty doesn't just mean strong. It means wealthy, influential, positioned for kingdom impact. Your children, your grandchildren, the babies not yet born who carry your DNA and your spiritual inheritance. They will be mighty because you were faithful. But here's where it gets controversial. Here's where I need to shake you awake. Some of you have been living small because you think humility means poverty. You've been accepting less because someone convinced you that struggling makes you spiritual. You've been settling for crumbs when God wants to make you a generational blessing machine. Stop it. Your financial breakthrough isn't just about you finally being comfortable in retirement. It's about establishing a dynasty of divine favor that will echo through eternity. When God funds your life, He's not just paying your bills, He's capitalizing your lineage. Think about the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, the Kennedys, families whose wealth spans generations because one ancestor established a foundation of abundance. But their wealth is earthly, temporary, limited by death and taxes and economic collapse. Your wealth is eternal. Your funding comes from the Creator who owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. Your legacy is backed by the God who spoke galaxies into existence and calls them all by name. Chosen one, you're not just funded, you're a divine trust fund for generations. But this legacy comes with responsibility. You can't just receive God's funding and hoard it like some spiritual miser. You have to steward it with the understanding that you're not the destination, you're the distribution center. 1 Timothy 6:18 commands, "Command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share." Every dollar God puts in your hands, every opportunity He opens, every blessing He pours out, it's all preparation for you to become the ancestor your family will thank God for, the one who broke the cycle of lack, the one who established the pattern of abundance, the one who chose faith over fear and funded the future with obedience. Your great-grandson will start his ministry with resources instead of debt because you tithed when it hurt. Your granddaughter will send her children to college without student loans because you trusted God's provision over your pension. Your nephew will buy his first home with a down payment that comes from dividends on your faithfulness. This is your moment to step into generational authority, to stop thinking like a survivor and start thinking like a patriarch, to stop accepting limitation and start establishing legacy. If you have children, grandchildren, nieces, nephews, call their names out loud right now and cover them in God's funding. Speak their names into this divine stream of provision. Declare over them what God has declared over you. You are funded. You are blessed. You are mighty in the land. But there's something else stirring in the spiritual realm, something that will determine whether this generational blessing flows like a river or trickles like a leaky faucet. And it all depends on what you do with this revelation in the next 24 hours. Do you remember the voices? The ones who said you'd never amount to anything? Your own family members who rolled their eyes when you talked about your dreams? The co-workers who whispered behind your back when you got passed over for that promotion again? The so-called friends who disappeared the moment your struggles became visible? They counted you out, didn't they? Wrote your obituary while you were still breathing? Celebrated your setbacks like they were personal victories? Some of you have siblings who genuinely believed you were the failure of the family. Neighbors who looked at your old car and shook their heads in pity. Former partners who told you that you'd never find anyone better, never build anything meaningful, never escape the cycle of barely getting by. But here's what they didn't know. Here's what hell itself tried to hide from them. While they were busy burying you, God was busy preparing your resurrection feast. Psalm 23:5 declares something so audacious, so deliberately provocative, that it sounds almost vengeful. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies, not behind closed doors, not in a private dining room. In full view of everyone who said you wouldn't make it, God doesn't just bless you quietly. He puts your victory on display like a billboard in Times Square. Think about that for a moment. The Almighty God of the universe doesn't just provide for you. He orchestrates your breakthrough in such a way that the very people who dismissed you have front row seats to your comeback. It's like he's saying, "You want to see what I do with the ones you threw away? Watch this." Your enemies aren't just the obvious ones. Sometimes they're wearing family faces. Sometimes they carry your last name. Sometimes they sit across from you at Thanksgiving dinner, still treating you like the child who couldn't get anything right. But God sees every slight, every dismissive comment, every moment they made you feel small, and He's been taking notes. You've carried their voices in your head for decades, haven't you? Every time you tried to dream bigger, their words echoed. Be realistic. People like us don't get lucky breaks. You're not smart enough, connected enough, young enough anymore. Those voices became your internal critic, the prosecutor that never rested, always building a case for why you should settle for less. But God is about to flip the courtroom. This isn't just about money, dear one. This is about vindication. This is about every person who made you feel invisible finally seeing you in high definition. Every door they said you'd never walk through, God's about to give you the key. Every level they said you'd never reach, He's installing your personal elevator. Here's what's going to devastate them. You're not going to gloat. You're not going to rub it in their faces or remind them of their predictions. You're going to eat at your table with such grace, such quiet confidence, such obvious divine favor that they'll have no choice but to acknowledge what they're witnessing. Your success won't need a narrator. It'll speak for itself. The woman who said you'd never amount to anything because you didn't finish college, she's about to watch you build an empire without a degree. The man who called you damaged goods after your divorce, he's about to see you in a love story that makes fairy tales look mediocre. The family members who treated you like the charity case, they're about to need your help. But here's where it gets beautifully twisted. God doesn't just want them to see your victory. He wants them to be blessed by it. That table He's preparing, there's overflow. Your abundance is going to spill into their lives, whether they deserve it or not. The very people who counted you out are going to benefit from your breakthrough. You're going to be the answer to prayers they didn't even know they needed. Joseph understood this. His brothers sold him into slavery, told their father he was dead, moved on with their lives while he rotted in an Egyptian prison. But when famine hit the region, guess who they had to bow down to for grain? The brother they threw away became the brother who saved their lives. Genesis 50-20 captures the divine irony perfectly. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. Your story is Joseph's story with a modern soundtrack. That business they said would fail, it's about to employ their children. That ministry they mocked, it's going to heal their marriages. That gift they dismissed as foolishness, it's going to be the thing that restores their hope when everything else falls apart. God doesn't just vindicate you. He uses your vindication to save the very people who tried to destroy you. Right now, somewhere in America, there's a table being set. The china is being polished. The silverware is being arranged. The feast is being prepared. And your name is on the reservation. Not hidden in a back corner, but right in the center where everyone can see. The doubters will have to watch you feast. The mockers will have to witness your joy. The ones who buried your dreams will have to watch them bloom in resurrection power. This is why the enemy fought you so hard. This is why the attacks were so personal, so relentless, so designed to break your spirit. Because he knew this day was coming. He knew that when God finally says enough, when he decides to display his faithfulness through your life, it wouldn't just be a blessing. It would be a testimony that destroys every lie about God's people being forgotten. The very people who buried you will have to witness your bloom. If you can feel this truth burning in your chest right now, if something in your spirit is saying, "This is my time," then comment below, "I'm eating at God's table." Let the whole world know you've got a seat reserved with your name on it. Because, chosen one, your famine is ending, your feast is beginning, and everyone who counted you out is about to get educated. But what happens when God doesn't just fund your life, but funds your legacy for generations? What changes when your breakthrough becomes your bloodline's breakthrough? What happens when God stops being your helper and becomes your financier? What does life look like when heaven's credit rating gets stamped on your soul? You walk different now, chosen one. There's something in your step that wasn't there before. It's not arrogance, it's authority. When you enter a room, the atmosphere shifts. People can't name it, but they feel it. That presence you carry, that's the weight of divine backing pressing through your very bones. Isaiah 40-31 tells us something profound. Those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. But notice what comes after soaring and running, walking. Because after God teaches you to fly, he teaches you to walk with such authority that every step reshapes reality around you. You don't walk anymore, you glide, carried by rivers of divine backing. Think about this for a moment. When was the last time you walked into your bank without that familiar knot in your stomach? When did you last open a medical bill without that spike of panic? When did you last dream about your future without that voice whispering, "But what if you can't afford it?" That voice just got evicted from your mind. Because when God funds your life, fear becomes homeless in your heart. But let me tell you what this really looks like on a Tuesday morning at 7 a.m. when the alarm clock screams and reality hits. You swing your legs over the side of the bed, and instead of that crushing weight of another day you might not survive financially, there's anticipation. Because you know that every step you take today is backed by the treasury of heaven itself. Your coffee tastes different when it's funded by God. Your commute feels different when every mile is divinely sponsored. That job interview you're walking into, you're not begging for a position, you're carrying heaven's recommendation letter. Romans 8:31 declares with thunderous authority, "If God is for us, who can be against us?" But have you ever really lived like that's true? Have you ever walked into a room knowing that the creator of the universe has your back? That's what funding does. It doesn't just change your bank account, it rewrites your DNA from the inside out. You carry yourself like royalty now because that's what you are. Not because you earned it, but because it was purchased for you before you took your first breath. Every step you take is like a river carving stone, steady, relentless, unstoppable. You're not forcing your way through life anymore. You're flowing with the current of divine provision. Obstacles that used to stop you cold now get worn down by the steady pressure of your God-backed momentum. But here's what shocks people about the funded life. It's not loud. There's no need to announce your blessing when it announces itself. You don't have to tell people you're covered, they sense it. Your calm in the storm becomes their curiosity. Your peace in chaos becomes their question mark. How are you so calm when everything's falling apart? They ask. Because I'm not holding it together, you answer. Someone else is. That someone is the God who spoke galaxies into existence with a whisper, and he's whispering over your life right now. Every bill, every dream, every fear that used to keep you up at night, he's covering it all with the same voice that commands stars to burn and oceans to stay within their boundaries. You walk into your doctor's office different now, not because you're not sick, but because you know the healer personally. You open your mailbox without dread, because you know who controls the postal service of Providence. You look at your children's future without terror, because you know who holds tomorrow in his hands. But this isn't about living in denial. This is about living in divine reality. The reality where God's resources are infinite and his love for you is unshakable. The reality where your problems haven't disappeared, they've just met their match. When Abraham left Ur of the Chaldeans, he didn't have a map, he had a promise. When he put one foot in front of the other, he wasn't following a GPS, he was following the voice of El Shaddai, God Almighty. And every step he took was funded by divine certainty, even when his circumstances screamed uncertainty. That's your walk now, chosen one. Every step funded by divine certainty. You don't nervously check your bank balance anymore because your balance isn't in the bank, it's in the one who owns the bank. You don't anxiously scan job boards because your employment status isn't determined by human resources, it's secured by divine resources. Stand up right now if you can. I'm serious. Stand up and walk across your room. With each step, say it out loud. Funded, funded, funded. Feel the weight of that truth in your bones. Feel the shift in your spirit. You're not just moving through space, you're moving through destiny, and every step is divinely sponsored. This is what the anointed walk looks like. This is how life changes when God stops being your emergency contact and becomes your primary provider. But if this is true, if you're really funded by the Almighty himself, then why are you still living like an orphan when you've been adopted into royalty? Listen to me, chosen one. Can you feel it? That shift in the atmosphere around your life. That electricity in the air that makes your spirit tremble. That's not your imagination. That's the sound of heaven's vault clicking open. That's the rumble of divine machinery moving resources that have your name written on them in golden letters. The old season is over. The contract you've been operating under, the one written in lack, signed in struggle, sealed with tears, it's been torn up, shredded, burned in the fires of God's justice. And tonight, a new contract has been drafted. Not written in ink that fades, but signed in blood that never dries. The blood of the Lamb that purchased not just your salvation, but your total provision. You've been living like a tenant when you were born to be the landlord, scraping rent money together when the deed was already in your name, fighting for crumbs when you owned the entire kitchen. But that ends now, right now. In this very moment, the title transfer is complete. You're not stepping into funding, beloved. You are the funding. You are God's living proof that he still backs his chosen ones. You are heaven's investment portfolio walking on two legs. When the angels look at you, they don't see struggle, they see stock certificates. They don't see lack, they see liquid assets. They don't see problems, they see profit margins that only eternity can calculate. Every bill that kept you awake at night, it was teaching you to depend on a provider who never sleeps. Every door that slammed in your face, it was redirecting you toward the door marked owner's entrance. Every dream that seemed to die, it was going underground to grow roots deep enough to support the forest God is about to plant through your life. Isaiah 43:19 thunders across your situation tonight. Behold, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs forth, do you not perceive it? I will make a way in the wilderness and rivers in the desert. That wilderness you've been wandering, those desert years when nothing grew. They weren't punishment, they were preparation. God was installing underground irrigation systems while you thought he was ignoring your thirst. But here's what's going to shake you to your core. Here's the truth that will rewrite every assumption you've had about your future. You didn't pass a test to get funding. You passed a test to become funding. God isn't just opening his checkbook for you. He's making you his checkbook. Every breath you take from this moment forward carries the signature of the Almighty. Every step you take leaves footprints of favor. Every word you speak carries the weight of heaven's treasury. The enemy fought you so hard because he saw the financial reports from your future. He read the projections. He saw the spreadsheets of souls that would be saved, the ministries that would be launched, the generational curses that would be broken, all because God decided to fund you. The warfare wasn't about your past. It was about his terror of your future. You think you're too old. Abraham was 75 when God called him to build nations. You think you've missed your window. Moses was 80 when he split seas. You think your mistakes disqualify you. David was an adulterer and murderer who became the man after God's own heart. Your age isn't your expiration date, it's your activation code. But listen carefully. This funding comes with a responsibility that will either elevate you or intimidate you. You're not being funded to hoard, you're being funded to flow. You're not receiving to keep, you're receiving to release. Every dollar that comes into your hands carries DNA from heaven's economy. It multiplies when it moves, it grows when it gives, it prospers when it's purposed. Malachi 3:10 wasn't just a suggestion, it was a legal document. Bring the whole tithe into the storehouse and test me in this, says the Lord Almighty, and see if I will not throw open the floodgates of heaven and pour out so much blessing that there will not be room enough to store it. You've been testing him through your faithfulness in the fire. Now he's testing the floodgates. They're creaking open. The sound you hear is abundance approaching at the speed of light. Chosen one. You passed. The exams are over. The inheritance is released. God himself is your sponsor, your guarantor, your unlimited credit line. The poverty that stalked your family tree for generations, cut down. The lack that whispered lies about your worth, silenced. The scarcity that made you small, evaporated. Type 777, one last time to seal this truth into your spirit. Let heaven see your agreement. Join this community of funded chosen ones. We rise together, we reign together, we resource together. Share this message and become the messenger that funds someone else's hope. Be the voice that breaks someone else's cycle of struggle. Rest now, chosen one. Stop striving, stop worrying, stop wondering if God remembers your address. You're funded. Today, tomorrow, forever. The bank of heaven never closes, and your account never empties. You're funded forever. Beloved chosen one, as we reach the end of this sacred journey together, I need you to hold 3 eternal truths close to your heart as you step into tomorrow. First, remember this. Your season of struggle has an expiration date, and that date is today. God didn't bring you through every valley, every storm, every dark night just to abandon you at the threshold of your breakthrough. You have passed every test heaven placed before you, and now his funding, his complete provision, flows into every area of your life. Second, your worth was never determined by your bank account, your circumstances, or the opinions of others. You were chosen before the foundation of the world, marked for abundance, destined for overflow. When God looks at you, he doesn't see your struggles. He sees his investment, his beloved child, his chosen vessel. Third, this isn't just about money. God's funding touches every broken place in your life. Your health, your relationships, your peace of mind, your family's future. It's all covered under heaven's comprehensive provision plan. You're not just financially funded, you're completely covered. But hear me clearly, you are not walking this path alone. The same God who spoke the universe into existence is still speaking over your situation right now. He's still moving mountains you can't see, opening doors you haven't found yet, and orchestrating blessings you can't even imagine. When the road feels uncertain, when doubt tries to whisper its old lies, remember that you have a Father who has never lost a battle and never missed a promise. And here, in this community of faith, you have thousands of brothers and sisters who understand your journey. We see you, we believe in you. We stand with you in prayer. You're not just a viewer on a screen, you're family, connected by the same hope, sustained by the same God, walking toward the same victory. Let me ask you this final question, and let it settle deep in your spirit. Now that you know God is funding your entire life, now that you understand your season of lack is over, how will you walk differently when you wake up tomorrow morning? Before I release you into your funded future, please allow me to place my hand on your shoulder through these words and pray over your life. Almighty God, Creator of heaven and earth, I come before you now, carrying every person who has watched this message from beginning to end. Father, you see their hearts, the dreams they've carried in silence, the fears they've wrestled with in the darkness, the faith they've held on to when everything looked impossible. Lord, I pray that you would breathe fresh wind into their weary souls right now. Where they feel depleted, restore them. Where they feel forgotten, remind them of their immeasurable worth. Where they feel overwhelmed, be their strength and their shield. God, I ask that you would open doors that no man can shut. Provide resources they haven't even thought to ask for. Send divine connections that will accelerate their purpose. Give them wisdom for every decision, courage for every challenge, and unshakable faith for every promise you've spoken over their lives. Father, heal their bodies where sickness has tried to take hold. Restore their minds where anxiety has built strongholds. Mend their hearts where disappointment has left wounds. Pour out your supernatural peace that surpasses all understanding. Most of all, Lord, let them feel your presence right now. Let them know in their spirit that they are loved beyond measure, chosen beyond doubt, and funded beyond their wildest dreams. Let this be the moment they remember forever, the night they discovered they were never alone, never forgotten, never without provision. In Jesus' mighty name, I seal this prayer and release your abundance over every life represented here. Amen. Now, beloved, I want to hear from you. In the comments below, share how God spoke to your heart tonight. What shifted in your spirit? What are you believing Him for in this new season? Don't hold back. Your testimony might be exactly what someone else needs to hear to keep believing. If you need prayer for a specific situation, ask this community to stand with you. We're not just subscribers, we're intercessors, and we believe in the power of agreement. If this message has awakened something in your soul, share it with someone who needs to remember they're not forgotten. Be the voice that reminds them they're chosen.